The Shaun Proulx Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
Katie Lang is getting something called the International Icon of the Year Award. Find out what that's all about coming up in just a bit here on the Shaun Proulx Show. And Carol Pope, the legend, the one and only, is joining us at the end of the show with brand new music. But as I was saying in the intro, if you think that COVID has devastated our economies, you were right. But if you think that the first thing we want to do in Canada and the US is to focus on the rebuild, studies and stats say you're wrong. In order to strengthen our economy, what we have to do first is make vaccines widely available to developing nations and economies and other people around the world. Dennis Hancock is the CEO of a biotech company doing just that, Mountain Valley MD, and he joins us now. Dennis, thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, good morning. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. I was so interested in this take because I think a lot of people would say, as I do, focus at home on the economy. Why? Can you take us through making vaccines available to other people around the world is key for our economy?
Yeah, so the gross domestic product impact of the consequence of disease and viral outbreak in third world countries has a direct proportion to how money is invested, education systems, wells, etc. And we don't realize how a functioning global economy is critical for sure for the G7 to continue to prosper. And so money that's not wasted in the cycle of medical treatment versus improving economies is directly related to that.
You're putting it in economic terms, but I'll put it in woo terms. We're all in this together, and if we don't all do well, no one's going to do well. That's what I heard.
Yeah, so that's a great reminder.
That's a broad perspective, spiritual take.
No, I love it. Our company mission, quite frankly, is more life, less death. And it's like, well, what does that mean? How do you do that? We've been, focused. So ivermectin is one of our macrocyclic lactone solubilization classes that we've applied to solubilize.
I'm going to get you to Fisher Price us on all of this.
Yeah, no, I will for sure. I will for sure. It's a class of drugs, and in that class of drugs, there's ivermectin, which again is headline news because it's a therapeutic for COVID. Yes. There's another drug called selamectin that we're very close to proceeding with trials on for tuberculosis as an example. But what's really amazing about, again, to this broader, more life, less death, well, you don't realize that the third world countries, the vaccines, frankly, are inaccessible. A lot of countries have to donate. The upper echelon of these economies get their vaccines, but it's just not economically viable for the rest of the country.
Paint us a picture of what it's like in another country like that.
Yeah, well, so one of our projects is cold chain, for example. Drugs that get shipped, most of the third world countries, 90% of them don't have electricity infrastructure even to keep drugs at the correct temperature.
Right.
So what does that mean? Well, $17 billion in expense just to produce and manufacture and ship drugs inside a cold chain, which is 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. And when they get to third world countries where there's no electricity infrastructure, 50% of those vaccines are actually spoiled as they come out. And that represents $35 billion a year. And so, to your sort of tee up question at the start, you quickly get into a rabbit hole where that's $50 billion that's not being spent on education. Yes. Well, you start to understand the magnitude of the problem.
What percentage of the world do you consider a developing nation or a developing economy? Like how much of the world is affected by this?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question as far as the percentage, but I've seen, frankly, we can say with ease that we're talking over half the world's population, and then there's a tier of what does developing look like versus those that are disadvantaged. Massive impact.
So you're striving to make vaccines widely available. One of the ways is, contrary to what we're doing here, no vaccine shot, no jab. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have a variety of technologies. The one I started to talk about was solubilization of current drugs. And so ivermectin is a good example of that. It's a broad therapeutic that you would use in place or in complement to a vaccine. It's how you would stop a pandemic from happening. So imagine it, administered like vitamin C on day 1, day 3, day 5, day 10. Our solubilized format is a rapid dissolve wafer, so it can be administered without water, as an example, which starts to be important in third world countries. And then the vaccine implication, again, is that we have a cold chain technology that's currently being evaluated by the FDA in the United States, and are actually expecting results on that in any day now. But we're testing up to 40 degrees Celsius, so that would be applied. Right now, we're working on the polio vaccine in that case. That would be applied across, it would be a proxy for all of the heat-sensitive vaccines. The polio vaccine, just for your audience's benefit, sits in, there's a single drug in category A, a single drug in category B. The polio vaccine we're working with sits in category C and would be a proxy for all the way through to F. So we've picked a really tough one to start because our vision is exactly what you're describing around shipping vaccines out of cold chain. The one thing I want to clarify, though, although it can be, we tested with the FDA our ability to lay the polio vaccine in a sublingual strip, which gets right to your point about needleless applications. There is still a precision, and one of the pharmaceutical partners we're working with, they've challenged us to work with a needle still in the end, because there's a precision in administration. So how we've reacted to that is we've laid a thin film inside a vial. That's what's being tested. We ship it outside of cold chain and then rehydrate it with distilled water in the local market. So it would still be administered in a needle, although the technology we've already proven can be delivered needle-free.
You're working with the People's Republic of Bangladesh as an example of a developing market economy that you are helping to serve and underserved people there. Take us through some of the hurdles that you face, and I'm sure there's a long laundry list, but what kind of obstacles get in the way when you're creating what you're creating and delivering what you're delivering?
Well, and so that question starts with how does it manifests itself here at home, right? Very political environment, very litigious in North America, certainly. Exactly. So, you start to look at, government roadblocks and how funding works. And so we're well funded. We have over $19 million in cash in the bank. So we're not sitting here, holding our hand out looking for government support. So how we got into Bangladesh was exactly how you opened up this interview. Starting where the world needs it the most. And it's not just humans. One of our big lanes is in husbandry animal class. And what people don't realize, if we took something like soluble ivermectin, the ability now to take this antiparasitic and administer it across the husbandry animal class, which is, goats and swine and cattle and poultry, and we are now changing the game in what could be administered for animal health, which has a direct relationship to human health, and also the GDP, where livestock's a big part of the livelihood. The ability to have a healthy animal economy in the husbandry space and companion animals, frankly, for dogs, cats, all of that. So when I think of, why Bangladesh? Well, we start there because we're setting up, first of all, they're a world-class pharmaceutical production hub, and we want to be in that part of the world to, for supply. They have very strong government regulations, so for counterfeiting and all of those things as we start exporting and managing, drug distribution globally. And then we have a very business-friendly environment. So working at senior levels within the government there, they've basically arms wide open, embracing the economic development. And so we're working with some incredibly sophisticated scientists. We're days away from announcing some work we're about to do there in cancer, as well as tuberculosis, with some very senior medical officials. And the cool part is the government sitting at the table. So, we're not doing reports to present reports to present reports. We're working with someone that's very motivated to solve the problem, work with us, and move forward quickly to commercialize.
What's your fondest wish for the work you do? Because I know that, well, I don't know, I'm going to surmise that in your world, you must be always a few steps ahead of where you're actually at, what you're actually doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I love that.
You've got a bigger vision than even what you're doing now, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I love that question because it sort of relates back to how broad a mission statement, when you start to say more life, less death, it almost seems like, are you kidding me? What does that mean? And, our desire, we describe ourselves as change makers quite often. We aren't the smartest people in the room. That's not what a change maker is. A change maker embraces other leaders, people who are fast, at their top of their game. We inspire each other, we learn from each other, and we collect this group of people who just continue to build on the science. It's learning from those that went before us and learning from those that are sitting at our table. And where that excites me is people often say, hey, you're competing in spaces where pharmaceutical, they'll spend $15 billion a year in R&D and they have thousands of scientists. That's not the magic. The magic, new invention comes from how you approach problems, how you learn from those that go before you. And so the stuff that we're working on is solving massive health problems, animal, like the husbandry, as I described, human. We didn't even get in today to the, mosquito-borne viruses as an example. We're going head on into, dengue, malaria, all of the Zika virus, the mosquito-borne viruses that start with the inability to effectively dose a parasitic drug like ivermectin. And so now we've opened up, channels that frankly are unprecedented. So to link this all back to your simple question, we get excited about the scoreboard of, we really can make a difference. We want to be able to immediately implement a project and see lives saved in that directive and impact. Even one of the drugs that we're working on, we're coding, the product name based on how many deaths have happened from COVID, because that's how real we want our work to be.
Wow. Mountain Valley MD, as the company is striving to make vaccines widely available to developing nations and economies and people around the world. Dennis Hancock is the CEO. Dennis, thanks for taking us behind the scenes of the fascinating work you do.
My pleasure. Great to speak with you.
Hey, we're getting musical second half of the show coming up. Superstar Carol Pope, and why Katie Lang is getting a big award. Carol's actually going to be at the event where Katie Lang is getting the big award, actually. You've got the Shaun Proulx show here on SiriusXM. Confused? You won't be when you come back.
You were wonderfully made, marvelous, amorous, glorious.